Chapter 7. A Kind Boy. Devansh was a boy of 11 years. He was the only child of his parents. He filled the empty spaces in his life by imagining things, and the power line took his thoughts away into a magical distance, far off among tall buildings and bustling towns. He knew walls were electricity, and the electric line took power far across the country. On clear evenings, when the sparrows gathered, he would see the wires like necklaces of glass beads. He loved to hear the birds making twittering sounds in excitement. The birds could fly anywhere they wanted, and they opened another door for him. One morning, he watched the sparrows taking off and occasionally coming back on the power lines. One of the sparrows got entrapped, hanging there flapping its wings. Devansh saw that it was binding at a joint. He wanted to rush and tell his mother, but she would scold him for being late for school. So, he climbed on his bicycle and rode off to school. Coming back from school, he felt anxious and went to see the sparrow. The sparrow was still there, its wings were spread but not moving. He thought that it was dead, but then he saw it flutter and fold its wings. The boy went in and called his mother, and they stood below the power line and looked at the bird. The mother shaded her eyes with her hand. "It is a pity," she said, "but you don't worry, it would free itself somehow." His father came home in the evening. Devansh followed him and soon got round to the sparrow. "I know," his father said. "Your mother told me." "Is it still there?" "Yes, father." "Can't we help her?" said Devansh. "Well, we can't do anything about," said his father. Devansh didn't have his dinner and went to his room thinking about the sparrow. The next day was Sunday, and he did not have to go to school. First, he looked out, and the bird, it was still there. He saw that other sparrows were hovering around the trapped bird, trying to help it. He rushed inside and dragged his mother out, and she stood shading her eyes again. "Yes, they are trying to help the entangled bird." "Isn't that strange?" she said. But the birds could not get the sparrow off from the power line. He thought that the only thing he could do was to get somebody to turn off the power for a minute, and then he could climb the tower like a monkey. At dinner that night he suggested it, and his father was angry with Devansh. Leaving for school the next morning, Devansh tried not to look up. But he couldn't help it, and there was the sparrow spreading and closing its wings. He could not think of anything but the trapped bird on the power line. After school, Devansh drove his bicycle to the nearest transmission station near his village. When he got there, he was faced with an enormous high fence of iron staves with spiked tops and a tall locked steel gate. Devansh peered through the gate and saw some men off duty sitting in the sun playing cards. He called to them, and a thin man in white shirt came over. Devansh explained what he wanted. If they would switch off the current, then he could go up and save the sparrow. The man smiled broadly. His name, he said, was Ram Bharose. He was just a maintenance man, and he couldn't switch off the current. But he unlocked the gate and let Devansh in. "Ask," he said. He went inside the room and saw a bald man with glasses sitting at a desk. Devansh did not have breath to say 5 words before his lips began trembling and 2 tears rolled out of his eyes when he spoke about the trapped sparrow. The man said, "Sit down, son, and don't be frightened." Then the man tried to explain. "If we cut off the power supply, then the factories would stop, Hospitals would go dark in the middle of an operation. Devansh didn't listen to the man as he was concerned about the sparrow. Devansh said, "But sir, it is more like a death of a sparrow." The bald man smiled. He took down Devansh's name and address and said, "You've done your best, Devansh. I'll see what I can do for you." Devansh was late at home and his mother was worried. He lied to her saying he had been detained after school. He did not have the stomach to look for the sparrow. In the middle of the night when he woke up, he saw that his mother was next to him and the light was on. "There's a man come to see you," she said. He went out and saw his father and the back of a man in white shirt. It was Ram Bharose. "Ram Bharose ji," he shouted. "Are they going to do it?" "They're doing it," Ram Bharose said. A lineman and a truck driver came up. They wanted to be shown where the bird was. Devansh glanced, frightened, at his father who nodded and said, "Show him." Devansh went in the truck with the man and the driver and Ram Bharose. It took them only 5 minutes to get the truck in position under the tower and run up the extension ladder. Ram Bharose hooked a chain in his belt and switched on his flashlight. He swung out on the ladder and began funning up as if he had no weight at all. He leaned over and carefully worked the bird's tiny claw loose from the wire binding, and then he put the sparrow in the breast pocket of his shirt. In a minute, he was down and he took the bird out and handed it to the boy. Devansh was almost speechless, holding the sparrow and feeling good. "Thanks," he said. "Thanks, Ram Bharose ji. Thanks, Ram Bharose ji." Devansh held the sparrow in his cupped hands and took little jumps and spread its slender wings.